Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is sponsored by Avalara. They breathe compliance so that you don't have to. Today, again, we have with us two of their experts. They're here to talk about 5 ways to help you simplify beverage alcohol taxes, licenses, and registrations. Now, before we begin, I have a quick technical note. This webinar is pre-recorded. However, the experts are with us in the live chat. So if you have questions anytime along the way, just pop them into the live chat over here and they'll answer them there as well. Now with that, let me pass it over to Sarah.
Welcome everybody today to the 5 ways to help simplify beverage alcohol taxes, license, and registrations. Shannon and I are here to talk to you about these important factors in your beverage alcohol tax compliance. So just as a disclaimer, while we hope you find this discussion helpful, this session is for informational purposes only and not legal or tax advice. I just want to get that out of the way. And as we're going to introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I am an indirect tax researcher here at Avalara, so I keep up with all of the changing laws and landscapes of the alcohol industry, especially with direct-to-consumer shipping, wholesale shipping, things like that here in the US. So I'm happy to talk about this. This is something that I am very passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. And thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Faria, Director of Tax Compliance Services at Avalara. I've been here over 11 years, so mostly in the sales and use tax world. And over the last couple of years, I've learned a lot about the beverage alcohol industry, and it's been amazing. Love to expand my experience there. I came to Avalara from public accounting, which is vastly different than the sales and use tax and beverage alcohol tax industry. And I, in public accounting, that's where I really gained my experience in my love for customer experience. I live in Sacramento, California, where I love to take full advantage of the vast differences of landscapes, exploring mountains and beaches and all that comes with living in California, which I'm sure many of our customers are aware of. So excited to get this started. At Avalara, what we talk about is tax compliance. We do the hard stuff so you don't have to. In fact, we are so passionate about simplifying tax compliance that our motto is simply tax compliance done right. We try to keep it simple because that's what it should be for our end user, right? Especially in beverage alcohol, license and registration requirements, as well as filing requirements, are so complex and constantly changing. Our number one priority is making sure that your license, registration, and filing requirements are processed accurately and timely. And you don't have to worry about it. You can do what you do best and run your business. So that is our number one goal. So moving on to the agenda, we really are going to cover some high-level topics: beverage alcohol industry at a glance, licensing and renewals, product registrations and renewals, maintaining DTC shipping, direct-to-consumer shipping, and then tax calculation and filing, and then how Avalara can help. So I think with that, let's kick it off, Shannon.
All right, so we're going to start with the beverage alcohol industry at a glance. It is pretty high level, and we're really focused a bit here on direct-to-consumer shipping. So I think we all know that 2020 changed everything, including the landscape of alcohol sales. And so you can see here, we're looking at 4 different countries and their e-commerce sales of alcohol in the last few years. And so you can see 2019, things started to pick up, but really in 2020, that's when we see just a huge difference in the market. It exploded. It was huge. And in the US, it even surpassed China, who was miles ahead of us originally. And so this increasing rate of increasing, right, this growth rate really stayed pretty constant up through 2022, where it started to level off. And this is for a lot of different reasons. Part of this is we started joining the world again. We started leaving our homes, and we didn't have to get alcohol delivered straight to us. We could go back to the liquor store, the grocery store, or to our favorite wineries, depending on where you live, if you're going to vacation, all that good stuff. But people were joining the land of the living once again and really experiencing it and going to wineries and things like that. And so we have seen it level off a bit in the last year or so, but that market's still growing. It's still growing at about 5.5%. That's projected to continue. The U.S. really likes convenience. I know I do. I get a DoorDash meal every now and then, and with wine, there's no difference. People want that convenience of getting it to their door, especially if they don't live close by their favorite wineries. So they join a wine club or something like that. And this is, all of that contributes to e-commerce sales. And then, of course, where can people receive their alcohol? Who allows direct-to-consumer shipping? And so nobody's surprised, the biggest industry for direct-to-consumer shipping is wine, specifically wineries, wine manufacturers. So wineries can access currently about 97% of the U.S. population with direct-to-consumer shipping. Really, Utah and Mississippi are our last holdouts. They do have a special order shipping situation there, but that's getting it shipped to a retailer and then you have to go pick it up. So it's not really direct-to-consumer shipping. And most of all of these licenses or all of these states have some kind of license or permit or something like that associated with direct-to-consumer shipping, but not all. In fact, currently, as of October of 2023, Alaska doesn't have a license. It doesn't currently regulate, but that is going to change in January when their new license goes into effect. So if your market includes Alaska, that's definitely something you want to keep on your radar. And then, distilleries and breweries both can only access very small portions of the U.S. direct-to-consumer market. Only at a few states, 11% of the population is accessed by distilleries and a little bit more for breweries at 17%. And you can see there's a little bit of overlap there, but not every state. And then, of course, there's wine retailers. I know a lot of wineries can sometimes be double licensed also as a retailer, but only about 28% of the U.S. population can be accessed by wine retailers. A couple states have a reciprocal agreement situation going on, which is a remnant of the pre-Granholm days. And then there's a state like Connecticut, that actually created a retail direct-to-consumer shipping license. So it really varies widely, as everything does here in the alcohol industry. So next, we're going to dive into some licensing and renewals. So if you're already a winery, or you know this, right? The very first thing you have to do is get your federal basic permit, or if you're a brewery, it would be your brewer's notice. This is the first step before you can do anything. You can't manufacture, you can't do anything without your federal basic permit. And then at your state level, wherever you're operating, I'm here in Sonoma County, so there's a lot of wineries here. They all have to get licensed in their operating state, which in this case would be California. But Oregon and Washington both have pretty large wine industries as well, and they have different operating state licenses because it's a different state. And those licenses all come with different permissions. So it's important to recognize what your goals are for your business in the state where you're manufacturing. And then there's state licensing, because if you want to expand your market beyond your home state, beyond where you operate, a lot of other states have licenses for wholesale shipping as well as direct consumer. And there's a couple that do self-distributing too. But you can't ship into those places without first getting licensed. And so a part of that, that's the first step, right? You get all these licenses. Well, once you have them, do you have them forever? Like, how does that work? So a lot of states have renewal periods, and they vary pretty widely. And so we're gonna go over those here in just a second. As I mentioned, the licensing periods can vary. So a pretty common one we see is just a 1-year license. It's pretty straightforward. We do see 2-year and 3-year licensing periods. So like in Alaska, as I mentioned, they are creating a new license for out-of-state direct shippers. And that license is a 2-year license. So it's biannual. And of course, not only the licensing periods vary, but the due dates vary as well. So some licenses, it's just dependent on when it was issued or when it was effective. So if you get a license on October 19th, for example, of this year, it would expire on October 18th of next year. We do see those some, but a lot of renewals revolve around the middle of the year or the end of the year. So June 30th is a very common date we see, or we'll see things, in April and May a little bit, or a little bit in July. But really June 30th specifically is a very busy due date. And then of course there's end of year. A lot of things last through the end of the year. December 31st, sometimes we see it, November on occasion, October. It depends on the license. Of course, you're going to hear me say it depends on the license or it depends on the state, because that is how our industry works. It's the motto of my job is, well, it depends on the state. And then, of course, with license renewals, there's different materials that may be, or supporting documents, things like that may be required. The fees vary. Sometimes it's the exact same fee as it was with the initial application. Other times it's a smaller fee because you've already applied back, a year ago, and there's no additional application fee. It's just the license fee, or maybe the renewal fee is just smaller. It very much depends on the state. And then, of course, do you need to, or is the state sending out renewal notices? Is that something that you need to keep an eye out for in the mail? Some states do that. It's a piece of paper that they mail to you and say, hey, you need to renew your license in the next 90 days or something like that. So every state's a little different. That's not any different with licenses. Now we're going to dive into product registration. So we already kind of talked about how before you can do anything, you have to get licensed, especially your TTB and local, your governing state alcoholic beverage control. Well, and so part of that too is once you're producing, before you can sell anything, you have to register those products that you want to sell. The first step, of course, it's up at the federal level with the TTB, and it's a certificate of label approval. That's for products with more than 7% alcohol by volume. Lower alcohol products like your seltzers or some of your beer, spritzers, things like that, do not require a COLA, but they may require formula approval or something along those lines, and the labels have to meet other requirements as well. Once your COLA is approved or you get your formula approval, you may also have to register it in your state. And then, of course, you have to register it in states that require it where you're doing business. So not every state has product registrations. And the bulk of product registrations that we see are for wholesale shipping. And so that's any shipping that's going to a distributor in that state. And so, it's important to know, does what you want to do in that state, does it require product registration? There are some direct-to-consumer shipping requirements around that as well. Sometimes states will have a true wholesale registration, and then for direct-to-consumer shipping, you just send them an email with the COLAs attached and a list of the products that you're going to be shipping directly to consumers. And other states just don't care. But you want to know where they do care, where you do need to submit these registrations. And varies widely on what's involved in these registrations. So sometimes it's brands, they just care about the brands that are being shipped, and that's about as high level as we see. And then it can get as minuscule as, every new vintage requires a registration or something like that. And then of course, label revisions are something you need to keep up with as well, especially if you're going to continue selling your product in that state. So some states it's the artwork. That's, as if it's the artwork or little verbiage on the label, something like that has changed. Some states want to know, others just want to know if you had to get a new cola, and everywhere in between. So it gets very specific from state to state. And of course, like licensing, there's renewals involved. And sometimes, not every state has a renewal, but a lot do. And so sometimes products are registered for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It just depends. I would say the 1 year is probably the most common. And then again, registration due dates can also vary in some cases. As with licensing, it's dependent on whenever that product was approved. Others, it's the middle of the year or the end of the year. Those are very common, we see as well. And then there's the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, which is their bottle bill registration system. It's based off of the date the account was created on that system, which is very unique. We've not seen anything else like it. And so it's just important to know, what are the registration requirements? How often do you have to get them renewed? And, what happens if you don't renew them or you don't renew your license or something like that? Some cases there's, you can register it late, but with a penalty. Others, you just have to completely register it new or apply for your new license, something like that. And that can cost a lot more money than just renewing. So knowing when your product renewals and your license renewals are due is extremely important. Now we're going to talk about specifically direct-to-consumer shipping. So everything we just talked about with licensing and product registrations is really, it can cover wholesale and direct-to-consumer shipping. But if you want to continue to ship directly to consumers wherever you're doing your business, or if you're only going to 2 states, you need to know what's going on in those 2 states. If you're going to the entire U.S., it's going to be a little bit different. One of the first things that you want to be aware of when you're shipping directly to consumers is making sure everybody's over the age of 21 or at least 21. And that's, there's an age check at time of purchase in a lot of cases, or age verification. Like a few states have requirements for age verification. That has to be either, you obtain a copy of a physical form of identification, state identification, or you can use a third-party age verification service. Avalara is one that we use, or that we can sell. So that's the first step, because if you get caught selling to underage individuals, you can have pretty prominent penalties and fines associated with that. And some states, you lose your license. So for 6 months or 18 months or whatever it might be. So that's definitely the first part and something everybody should be doing when selling alcohol. And then of course, the common carriers are also obligated to check ID at time of delivery. Then we of course have business license requirements. So do you have the right license? Is it renewed? Is it still active? Are you in good standing with that state in order to renew your license? Meaning, are all of your taxes paid? Things like that. It's important to make sure that that's all kept up to date and active. Otherwise, you're going to be shipping without compliance. And then there's dry areas. There's only Kentucky has quite a few. Alaska has a lot. And then I think there's like one in West Virginia. But it is still important to know that you are allowed to ship where you are shipping, because there are still dry communities that will not allow you to purchase alcohol or obtain or possess alcohol. So it's important to know that as well. And then of course there's the volume limits. A lot of states have some kind of limit as to how much you can ship per person or per household, or even for the whole state. over within a year or within a month or something. It just depends on the state, which is what should be my catchphrase. So it's important to know how much you're shipping and where you're shipping it to. Are you allowed to ship? Do you have the right license? Is the person over the age of 21? Lots of considerations for direct-to-consumer shipping compliance. And a piece of that is tax filing, because if you don't file your taxes, you don't get to keep your license. And so Sarah is going to go ahead and talk a bit about tax calculation.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. So, at a high level, here is like the bullet points of how you get through a monthly filing cycle, right? So you need to know where you collect tax. You need to know where you need to register. So where you collect tax is going to depend on all those multiple things like economic nexus, and marketplace sales, etc. So there are many considerations into doing that. And if you need help, a nexus study is definitely recommended to understand where and how you should be reporting that tax. And then when you do determine where you need to report that tax, you have to register. So that is one of the pieces that has to happen up front so that you can start collecting that and managing that tax. And then calculation, that is definitely something that we do in AvaTax. That is our number one goal here, is to calculate taxes all over the place in every type of tax. So that is one of the keys here, is being able to enable those calculations accurately and efficiently. You need to be able to track exempt sales for our wholesalers and et cetera. Like, we need to be able to manage that and report accordingly, because exempt sales, even though they're non-taxable, they still need to be reported on returns. So we have to manage that. And then you have to remit your tax. And so I have led tax return teams for over a decade, and I, that's my bread and butter, is remitting that tax. And so we kind of see it on the downstream, and it's, we definitely see a benefit to businesses that have all these other steps in place before we get to that return section, because then we have to actually remit the tax and we have to do it accurately. So these are all of the areas that we believe that like Avalara can kind of help bring this together. So so we decided to point out, just kind of to simplify some of the challenges of tax compliance, and by calling out the key challenges, 4 challenges that we chose. Everybody knows, I'm sure, that every state has their own mandate and they're changing rules constantly. We did see an influx in changing rules over, the Wayfair decision and marketplace, economic nexus, all these things. Everything is always changing. Those are big changes, but there's always little changes that are constantly happening, because on a state by state level, these decisions are allowed, are constantly taking place. And so managing that is almost just a full-time job, right? So being able to reach out to a trusted advisor or accounting firm or tax compliance company or Avalara, like, we are here to help manage those changing rules. Thresholds when it comes to economic nexus and marketplace and all those things, definitely matter. Where you have to report and how you have to report. So this is one of probably the most complex challenges when it comes to tax compliance. If we move on to challenge number 2. So returns deadlines. We know that the majority of our returns are due on the 20th. And there's so much that goes into what the returns deadlines entails. It's not only monthly, depends on your thresholds of how much you're collecting. That depends on when your returns are due. So managing those returns deadlines can be just as tedious as managing all of the other stuff I just mentioned. They vary by state and they vary by frequency. They just vary. And so that whole entire process is dependent on being able to keep that filing, what we call internally as a filing calendar, up to date and make sure you're managing, like, am I at the threshold that might put me into a monthly as opposed to a quarterly, and then managing when those returns are due, because they're not always the same, monthly versus quarterly, even in the same jurisdiction. So I think this is a really important call out, because it can just, it can create notices and it can create late filings if you don't keep up on that. Challenge number 3, aggregating tax data. We all have data from different sources. And I think in this industry, what comes to mind is not only online sales, we've got store sales, and then we've got like shipment from in warehouse sales. And we have states that are origin based versus destination based. And so there are all kinds of complexities when it comes to tax data and how to aggregate that into a return that we can then be accurate to the jurisdiction. So I think that it's important to call out, and it's one of the most interesting things when it comes to the, if you came into the sales tax world, post whatever your business decision was, and you just suddenly had to manage all of this, like it can be very time consuming. Some states have location-based reporting, some states don't. It's just a very tedious process. So we offer automation at Avalara to help with this process, but it can be time consuming and dreading, honestly, for many companies. So moving on, challenge number 4, managing returns filings. As everybody knows, there's thousands of returns. There's sales and use, excise, shipping reports, and you have to manage the deadlines versus the all of the different time compression that we are in, because different from income tax world, you don't get 4 months to file your return. You file it on a monthly basis for the most part. And so you're always under the gun, and you're always kind of up against that challenge of trying to get all your data consumed into a manageable place and then file your returns on time and accurately. So it's such a time compressed model that this world is. And I think that one of the most important call-outs is just that, like, that is so incredibly hard to manage as a company that is trying to also run your business. So outsourcing, I think, is an excellent thing for people to do, so that you don't have to manage all of that, like that other tax compliance research and work and those deadlines, because websites are changing all the time, especially recently. We've seen a lot of changes on websites and how they file the taxes. So keeping up with that is something that's what we do here, right? That's our job. So I really take pride in how much we relieve businesses of this stress, because that is so a job in itself. You can have a whole tax and compliance department at your business. So, and then we also maintain historical records and offer different ways of methods of filing and remitting payments, depending on what the jurisdiction offers. So, how Avalara can help? If I didn't already say that already, how we do it, I mean, we offer the full suite, right? So we try, like, what our goal is to reduce the time that our businesses spend on tax compliance and automate it. Automation is our number one goal. And so we want our end-to-end solution to be send tax information and we file the returns, and we keep track of all of the extra stuff that goes on. So not only just you collect your tax, we calculate your tax, or whatever other ERP system that you're providing, and you send us that tax data, and we can remit that tax on your behalf. We're also keeping up with jurisdictional changes. We're keeping up with shipping verification and all of these different, all of the different pieces that go to that whole entire suite of Avalara tax compliance. So that is our number one goal. And anything else to add to that, Shannon?
I think this slide really shows it well. It's cyclical. So, you have to have your licenses before you can register your products or make products. And you have to get your projects registered. And then you can ship them, which would require tax, excise tax, sales tax, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, are you shipping legally? Are you compliant? And then the returns and reporting, if those things aren't done correctly or on time, or they're missing or something, your licenses could be at risk. So it is really a circle, and we handle all of that. So you don't have to.
Here are some resources that we've supplied just for some extra information if you are so interested, and we will also be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.